Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Covenant Connections. It's been a while since we've recorded a session, Bill, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Ariel. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. We have such a unique episode today talking about both Passover and Easter.
Today is Easter here as we're recording this, and you're in the middle of Passover, right?
Absolutely, yes. That's amazing. So, how about we start with you? Tell me a bit about Easter. Um, and also, I'm kind of curious to hear about the name. What does it mean, Easter? Is it East related to East or what?
I wish I knew where the name Easter came from.
I heard a theory. I don't know if it's true that it's related to the Canaanite goddess. The Hebrew name is Ashtoret. Ashtoret. So it's like sounds like Easter. So it could be that. I don't know.
I don't know. We'll have to look that up. In Swedish, it's påsk.
Post
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from either.
from the post
But
office.
yeah,
But tell me, it's like for me, it's so you're basically celebrating or commemorating the resurrection, right?
correct. So yeah, I'll tell you about a little bit about Easter. I want to hear about Passover, and what I'd like to do is talk about how they are related, the things that come together with that. So what we have here in the Christian world is we call it Holy Week. It's celebrating kind of the last week of Jesus's life when he rode triumphantly into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, just like the prophecies of the Old Testament said that he would. And then he was had the Last Supper, was taken into the Garden of Gethsemane, took upon himself the sins of the world there, was betrayed, put on trial, condemned to death. Pilate offered Barabbas in his place, which the people said no, and they took Jesus and they crucified him, put him in the tomb, and then on the third day he was resurrected. So the Easter celebration specifically is about the resurrection, where he overcame death and made it possible for all of us to be resurrected. But we, especially in our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we celebrate the entire, the atonement. The Easter is resurrection, obviously, is a big, huge part of it, but Gethsemane was a huge part of it, and everything in it is symbolic. And as we get to understanding the Passover from you, I'm interested because we believe that last period of time was the fulfillment of the Passover with the unblemished firstborn lamb being sacrificed and the blood protecting and overcoming all those things. So I'm very curious to hear a lot of those things and the deliverance, which is what
Yeah,
God did as well.
yeah. So there's a reason why these two coincide in terms of dates because the resurrection, the Last Supper, is considered. I don't know if it's unanimously considered as such, but as far as I know, it's considered the Passover, the
Yeah,
Passover meal, right?
right.
So you do agree with that? You do.
Yes.
What, is there like a specific place where it says that, or is it just an assumption? Or I don't know.
I think it says that he sent his apostles to prepare the Passover meal, and they found that upper room where they prepared the meal.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, I also encountered that this room was kind of discovered in Jerusalem where they had that meal.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also they discovered the priests, the highest rabbi, the rabbi's location as well, the house, Kaifa. I don't know
Caiaphas.
if
Yeah.
yes, yeah. You have that thing. All right. So I honestly don't know how. how matching my knowledge is with everything that
Yeah,
you.
so far it's exact. So
Okay,
yeah,
great. Right. So Passover. So let's talk about the literal meaning of the word Passover. So in Hebrew, we say Pesach. Pesach is so. If you would ask an Israeli to translate the word Passover, then they would say something like skip over in Hebrew. Pesach is the exact same thing. It's just a very, I would say, kind of high literature kind of word, fancy word for skipping over something. And as the story goes, God skipped over the houses of the Jews when the last, how do you say, 10 what? 10?
plague,
The
plagues.
10 plagues, when the last plague
I was
was
just reading that this morning.
struck upon. Yes. So the last one was the death of the elderly child, right?
The
The
firstborn.
firstborn, right? So that skipping over is the Passover or Pesach in Hebrew. So Pesach is celebrated here. It's one of the most important, I would say, holidays. In fact, we've spoken in the last one of the last episodes on the tefillin, if you remember, that the Jew wraps around the hand and puts another one on the head. That's basically to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. So every time we put it, and the Jewish person puts it every morning, the man, every morning except for Saturdays, basically you read a part where you talk about the Exodus. So it's not only on Passover night. This was such an important event. It's so, rooted in our belief, so that you actually read it every single morning, and you remember this part about the Exodus from Egypt every single morning. So yeah, so we gather to Passover meal, Passover supper, or the holiday itself, where we read a specific book, which we call the Haggadah. In that book, it tells the entire story of what happened to the Israelites, the Hebrews in Egypt, and how they were released by God from being slaves, which is such a crucial thing in our mindset as the Jewish people today. Breaking free talks a lot about freedom in general. There's another name for Passover, the holiday of freedom, Chag HaCherut. And when you say Chag HaCherut, everybody knows it's Passover. It's not like something that only 2-3 people know. You can actually call it Chag HaCherut. Everybody knows you mean the holiday of freedom. So Passover or the holiday of freedom. It's like two synonyms. And so we celebrate it. We have specific things that we eat that night. And you'll tell me how deep you want me to get into this. But I think the most important commandment that we follow through the entire week and a half of the Passover holiday, because there's the meal itself and there's the holiday that continues up till now, which we're in the midst of, is that we don't eat non-kosher. But non-kosher for Passover, there's a specific word for it. Things that relate to everything relating to bread, to pasta, that's called chametz. Chametz in Hebrew is the thing that we don't eat. So we basically cleanse our houses from everything related. You take out the cereal, you take out the pasta, you take out every food has to have a specific label on it that's written kosher for Passover. And so you only stick to kosher with food which is kosher to Passover, and you stick to it. And so the matzah is the famous bread replacement during this time, is to commemorate the fact that they didn't have time to prepare and let the yeast, create bread.
Unleavened bread, I think is what we call it.
Unleavened bread. That's what you call
Unleavened.
it.
Unleavened. Yeah.
Unleavened. What does that mean?
Unleavened. It means it doesn't have yeast in it, so it doesn't rise.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. So because they didn't have time to let the yeast rise, so no yeast, no puffed bread. Although these days, just as technology advances, you got everything today. So even McDonald's can sell kosher for Passover buns because they make them special. They're not the ordinary buns, and you can feel the difference, but it looks the same. But most of the people still stick to matzah and all the and I can tell you throughout time there are specific traditions. Like every kid will have his chocolate spread on a matzah every Passover, and it's like the taste of childhood. There's something about it.
Wow.
Customs of the Israelis.
That is great.
So, and I understand in Easter, and tell me how is this connected? Like kids get a basket with a bunny with eggs, chocolate-filled eggs, and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
we just went through that with my grandkids here this morning. And so, yeah, often we have the Easter bunny that comes and brings a basket and it has eggs. Like we usually use little plastic eggs and put like candy in them or whatever else. And, an egg just represents new life, and we
Oh,
that egg and there's goodness inside, right? And I have no idea where the whole bunny thing came from, but like for my kids and grandkids, they got, they get the eggs, which are representative of that, but they also, my daughter gave them books that teach about Jesus and the resurrection as well. So they try to make it more religious of the actual reason we have Easter, not just about the candy and everything. So
so is there a specific sermon or something that you're doing in addition to handing out those candies?
well, in a lot of churches, they'll have special Easter services today. In our church, we had special services last Sunday. That's because the first Sunday in April for us and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the general conference for the whole world. So we do that today, but that isn't just because Easter's on a different day every year. It doesn't always happen that way. And then we'll have, a special service. And basically that's what we do. We talk about Christ and the resurrection. And, there's a common saying that we say, which is, without Easter, there wouldn't be a Christmas. Because without that final sacrifice and the overcoming death and sin, we wouldn't celebrate that he was born and accomplished that, right? So, but I am curious because in the original Moses story, the Israelites went in their homes and they put blood on the door frame, right? Now, is
Yeah.
that, from what I understand, it was like on the sides and on the top, right?
Yeah. They had to mark it. How exactly did they mark it? I'm not sure. What does the text say? We can check it if you want, and I can tell you in Hebrew. But they had to mark it on the frame, right? Somewhere on the
Right.
frame. Let's find it if you want me to.
Okay.
If you
And
want
you,
the
you
exact
can,
text.
if you want to look that up, we can. But so we view that whole Passover as a symbolic representation of Christ's atonement and sacrifice.
Oh,
So even the blood on the door kind of represents him on the cross with his hands and his head with the blood from the thorns and on his hands on the wall. And the lamb that they eat, there's the unblemished lamb. They couldn't break a bone because Jesus didn't have any of his bones broken. And it was all symbolic of that final sacrifice of the lamb
right.
that would deliver Israel.
So yeah, I can see that the verse says like this. It says, "והיה אדם לכם לאות על הבתים." So yeah, they had to mark the. You know what a mezuzah is?
No.
And mezuzah is maybe you've seen sometimes the Jews, especially in their houses, they have this little thingy on the door. When they enter, they kiss it.
Oh yeah, okay, that's what it's
That's
called.
called a mezuzah. A mezuzah, the Americans or English-speaking people call it a mezuzah, but in Hebrew we say a mezuzah. And so it has a little card in it with specific verses,
Uh-huh.
and so the specific term here is that they marked it on both mezuzot Vala mashkof, which means on the top part of the entrance. So you're right. It's like you have to mark it from both sides
Sides and
and
the
the
top.
top.
So kind
Yes.
of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you basically say this is correlating to Jesus's both hands being crucified and the head with the thorns.
Yeah. Kind of representative.
Right. Right. I actually saw this podcast not too long ago, and the guy that spoke about the crucifixion, I forgot his last name. His first name was Jeremiah. And so this guy found, or God, I don't think he found, yeah, somebody sent it to him or he bought it from an auction, a nail from the first century, which the Romans used to use for crucifixion. And he explained the amount of torture that Jesus went through during that crucifixion using that specific nail, showing that, in movies like The Passion of Christ, you can see Christ is standing on a little pedestal or something. Sometimes they draw the cross with something that the feet can
go on. Yeah.
can stand on. He says there was no such thing. Like the nail was like, I don't know, very long, longer than this pen, and it went through the ankle into the wood, right? So the feet were, adhered to the wood with using that nail, and so yeah, it was.
And from what I understand, when they would be like that, they couldn't breathe well because they were all shrunk down. So they'd have to try to lift up. But when they lift up, they'd have to push down on those nails in their feet in order to lift up, in order to breathe. And they couldn't hold that. And they just,
Wow.
horrible cycle.
Yeah, it sounds horrible indeed. And I remember you told me that the LDS Church does not focus on Jesus as that suffering part that much, as much as the resurrected Jesus.
Yeah.
Am I right?
We obviously honor it and are totally aware of that. We just don't use the cross as a symbol of him. So it's not like we don't appreciate it, we do. But if we're going to have a symbol in our lives that represents him, we don't want it to be the emblem of his death. We want it to be the emblems of his life. So that's really it. It isn't that we don't honor the cross and what happened there. It's that we don't use it as the main symbol to remember him, right?
That's an interesting and a very substantial differentiation from the Catholic Church, I would say, right? That they focus on it very much.
They do, and it's important. I mean, we probably focus as much on Gethsemane as we focus on the cross because it was there that he suffered, that he bled from every pore and pleaded that that bitter cup would pass from him, which I understand part of the Passover meal is bitter herbs, which is kind of a representation of, you take the bitter like Christ did. That was part of that symbolism as well. And
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I can show you if you'd like the specific Passover. We have a specific plate. It's not just something that we we have a specific plate that we buy and we use. And let me show you the plate. Here we go. Share screen.
everything that God does is symbolic. It's fascinating,
It is. It is. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
So yeah, um, it looks awful, and it is awful in a sense. But let me share with you what everything here and what you see. So basically, it's funny because you mentioned a chocolate egg. We get an egg, and I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
this one stand-up comedian saying, the Christians won Passover. They didn't only win Christmas versus Hanukkah. They win Passover versus Easter. They win Easter because what would you like? An egg filled with chocolate or an egg filled with egg? So, so
We
yeah.
also
So
color eggs and stuff that are real eggs, by the way. Yeah.
So we have the egg here, which is basically to commemorate the sacrifice in the temple, right? And I also heard a very interesting, I don't know how substantiated it is, an interpretation of the egg, which is the egg, the more it's exposed to extreme conditions like heat, it becomes stronger, it becomes more firm, right? When you boil it, technically. So
Yeah.
just like the people of Israel, when they, which is absolutely true, when times get tough, the people of Israel do get tougher and do stand together and overcome. So there's something beautiful to it.
Yeah.
This thingy in Hebrew is the translated as the arm of the chicken, right? This little wing here is the arm of the chicken. It's to commemorate a specific verse which says God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand, right? Bezroa netuya, be'ad chazaka or bezroa netuya. So this is like the hand, the arm, and this is to commemorate that specific verse, that it's a symbol of strength and pride. Then you have this thing, which is very bitter. It's called maror. Maror is to remember the bitterness. There's actual a verse also which the Egyptians made the Israelites' life bitter. They bittered their lives, and so remember the bitterness that your ancestors went through. You don't skip over the pain and go to all the sweet stuff only. You have this thing or another type of herb, which is karpas, which you soak into salt water to remember the tears and the sweat of our ancestors. And actually, there's a cartoon called The Prince of Egypt, which I love tremendously, and
Yeah.
it is phenomenal. And there's a song there. The movie starts with the Israelites being slaves, and it starts with the tears and the salt on our eyebrow, and so it actually starts with all the salty tears and stuff like that. You have the charoset, which everybody prepares differently. So the charoset is sweet. It's usually so in our family we usually do it with a silan. Silan is dates, the liquid dates. I don't know how you call it. It's like a date syrup, a date syrup with nuts in it. So it's very sweet,
Wow.
and it also it meant it commemorates both the fact that even within slavery there were glimpses of good and redemption. Some people say that it commemorates the type of cement that the Israelites used to work with. And there's the radish here, which is another type of a bitter food. And according to our old rabbis, the radish is a little different than this bitter thing, chazeret. The radish is sometimes it starts off a little sweet and then it becomes bitter. And so many people used to say that it's just like the slavery in Egypt, that it wasn't directly, the Israelites weren't taken as slaves immediately. It started off soft and then it became more and more difficult. And what you don't see here, which is usually in the middle, is the matzah bread, which I assume, you know what, I'm not going to assume. I'm going to Right, and matzah, just so that everybody can see how matzah looks.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is how it looks. Yeah. So basically, the matzah looks like this. I know it's weird. Maybe you remember, like, there was once a time where computers had all these cards that you
Oh,
had to
yeah.
punch
It's
in
like a
them.
punch card.
Exactly. It's like a punch card. And it probably tastes like a punch card as well. No, I'm just kidding. This is actually, with the right topping on it, it's pretty good. And people know how to make beautiful things out of this thing. You know, you wet it a bit and then you can roll it, and then you can have like a spring roll with whatever you want in it. And there are all sorts of stuff that you can do with a matzah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the Passover in like 2 seconds.
It's great.
It, it's for me personally, it's always a substantial holiday. My birthday is always around this holiday, and so I have very fond memories of Passover. When I was 10, in Israel, there was a huge migration of people from the Soviet Union in the 90s, in the early 90s. And so I didn't have any family whatsoever growing up. It was only me and my sister. And suddenly we had cousins and distant cousins. And I was like, and just imagine a kid by the time he's 10 or 11, never seeing a cousin, never knowing what what that means even. And all my friends obviously had so many cousins and relatives, and we didn't. And then we had that first Passover dinner where my mom invited so many people and family, and she gave me the privilege to read the Haggadah and basically run the Seder night. And I actually remember this so fondly, and my mom keeps reminding me of it every Passover. So yeah, great memories of this specific holiday.
That is great. That is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So one question about that I wanted to ask you. So and let's go back to Gethsemane, because we did speak about it in one of the episodes. So
Hmm.
Jesus was suffering, bleeding from every pore in his body, but who was he begging or asking? Uh, was he asking mercy? Was he asking, what was he asking for?
So he was praying to his father, God, and he was very much aware of how painful and bitter this was going to be, to take upon himself the pains, the suffering, the sickness, everything that we go through, so that we could overcome that. And what he said was, in his prayer, is, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. In other words, the bitter cup. That if there's another way to do this without having to go through all this pain, let's do that. But nevertheless, thy will be done. Point being, even Christ, the one perfect man that ever lived, struggled with going through a hard thing, and even asked to be released from that difficulty if it was possible. And yet, in the end, he subjected himself to the will of God and went forward through the pain to get to the sweetness, then the joy on the other side of it. And I think that's a real example to us, that sometimes we have to go through hard times, and we would ask God, hey, can you just not have this be this way? Why do I have to go through the hard stuff? And yet sometimes he says, you got to go through that in order to get to the other side. And what we gain from that is so much better. You know, that's what Gethsemane was, and that struggle. One thing that I find fascinating is all through the Jewish history and through our history and through the future that's coming is a constant story of bondage, suffering, deliverance. You know, the Jews got Babylonian captivity. They got taken here and came back, and taken and came back, and they suffered, and they were enslaved and relieved and redeemed again. And in our history, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when the church was restored, we had our own exodus where we were persecuted and had to, as a people, be delivered from it and go across the entire United States to get away from it and to be delivered from it.
Wow.
And those were hard times as well. It's very much correlated, you know. And we see here in what we would call the last days that the Jews were dispersed, the diaspora, and then have been, as you said, over the last 50 years, a lot of them have now come back. And you saw that, and your family and your cousins coming together. We call that in our church the gathering of Israel. And we very much believe, and that's what I'm sure our prophet will talk about that today, actually in our general conference, is the gathering of Israel, that this is the time where God is gathering the children of Israel, both to Israel and to his gospel, and those who covenant to worship the true God are his chosen people and will be delivered. But there will be hard times between now and then. You're in the middle of that, Ariel, and so are we. But we have to remember that on the other side of bitter is joy and peace beyond measure, and we trust in God. For that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually feel very grateful to be alive in this specific day and age or this specific time. And I was actually reading a verse from Psalms a while ago, and I don't want to mess it up. Let me just find it in English because I have to share with you one of the interpretations for it. Let me just a sec. Psalm 9. So why do you reckon? Because the Exodus from Egypt is a story that it's the tribes of Israel leaving Egypt, and on the way Moses gets the Ten Commandments, everything that the Christians believe as well.
Yes.
So I'm kind of wondering, and maybe it's naive, why aren't you guys also celebrating Passover?
Because we believe, well, in a way we are, because we believe that the Passover was God's symbolic representation and requirement to look forward to the ultimate sacrifice and Passover when Christ became the final sacrifice and allowed that Passover for us to be redeemed from death and redeemed from sin. And that he fulfilled, we talked about this before in another episode as well, that he fulfilled everything that the Passover represented. So we switched from looking forward with the Passover to Easter, which is looking back and honoring that great final sacrifice.
That's pretty nice. Can you tell me? I opened up Psalms chapter 9, but I see different references in different places. I want to hear what you find in chapter 9, verse number 10.
All right, let me pull it up here. Psalms 9, verse 10.
Yeah.
And they that know thy name will put their trust in thee, for thou, Lord, hast not forsaken them that seek thee.
Yeah, so that's a completely different text from what I have. Like, I have in a different place where it says, and the Lord shall be a fortress for the crushed, a fortress for times of distress.
Oh, that verse 9 sounds more like that. The Lord also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble.
So there's a difference in the numbering as well. Interesting.
Apparently.
So the thing I wanted to share with you, because we've spoken about the bitterness and the times of trouble. So in Hebrew, there's a word for time, which means zman, but this is not the word that is used by King David in this specific verse. It says misgav le'itot betzara. Et is, if you ask the ordinary Israeli or Hebrew speaker what's the difference between et and zman, they're going to say it's the same thing. It's time, but it is not the same thing. When you dive into it, et is something which is specific, like a specific time, uniquely formed, uniquely designed, uniquely purposed for a specific thing. So when King David uses the term trouble, or for the times, did you say trouble for times of trouble or for times of
trouble? Yeah.
times of trouble? Here it says times of distress. All right, but whatever we want to call it, in Hebrew it doesn't use the word times of distress. It uses a specific term, which means that it has an ending. That it's, I wouldn't say short, because it's not. It's, I don't want to sound like it's limited. It doesn't have to be short, but it's limited in its capacity, unlike time, which is prolonged.
Yeah.
And so here there's something which I found fascinating, that King David used that specific term for distress or for trouble or disaster or whatever, that it is limited, and God will be the Savior. Which word did they use? Here it says fortress. Does it use fortress for you?
Refuge.
Refuge. So in Hebrew it says misgav, which misgav is not a fortress or a refuge. It's actually a high place. It basically pulls you higher, and this could be taken to so many directions, right? It takes you higher, whether it's through the consciousness or whether you look up and you remember that you're above these times of trouble. There's something that's beyond that. There are so many ways. These three little words, misgav leitot betzara in Hebrew, mean a world, depth of meaning in this thing. So I loved it very much. And so when we spoke about the bitterness, I totally agree with you.
I think it's also relevant and important to say, I think God does have a time when the suffering will end and the joy and the peace will prevail. I think that's part of this as well. And Ariel, you're making me want to learn Hebrew, so you may be my tutor.
It'll be my pleasure. It'll be my pleasure. All right, my friend. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our viewers and listeners. Thanks so much. We will see you on the next one.